What does it mean to play with a baby, and why is it important? Well, babies naturally play on their own. They play with their bodies, they play with sounds from their mouths, and as they get a bit older, they learn to explore and manipulate toys in a playful way. But there is a special aspect of playing that happens in the interpersonal space between a mum and a dad and your young baby or your young child. And the mutual enjoyment that this potentially gives all of you is very important in a child's emotional development. What kinds of play? Well, with a small child, it may be through stroking, it may be through touching and tickling, blowing raspberries, or it can be singing, or simple turn-taking games like peekaboo. And of course, as children get older, playing with toys together and reading books. So what sorts of toys make good toys for our children to play with? People like to buy toys for children. You like to buy toys for your children, grannies and friends bring gifts around, and we're always quite intrigued by the expensive, usually educational ones. But you can ask most mums, and I think you'll probably know yourself, that the Tupperware drawer or a bowl and a spoon can be a source of endless amusement for a child, particularly if you're in the kitchen at the same time. I prefer old-fashioned toys, building blocks, cars, farm animals and wild animals, dollies, because I think that they encourage creative, imaginative, fantasy play. And it is that kind of play, symbolic play, that children use to process their feelings and to work through their experiences. The development of symbolic play is a very important aspect of emotional development. It happens towards the end of the first year. And I think that if we can encourage it, we help our children with later abstract reasoning and all kinds of EQ and IQ related developments. Most children will choose a parent over a toy, a parent that they can wrestle around with, kick a ball to, draw with, or be read by. So you want to know what kind of activity you should be doing with your child? Well, it depends on your child, I guess, and the time of the day. Sometimes children want quiet, calming, settling down kinds of activities. Sometimes they want winding up kinds of activities. Dads are very good for that. Sometimes children are looking for something that is stimulating and will whet their appetite for acquiring knowledge and being curious about the world they live in. And sometimes children just want to be cuddled and have physical play, kind of close, intimate connections with you. The best sort of activity is always one that is pleasurable for both of you. It doesn't really help if you think that it's going to be great to do finger painting with your child. If you're somebody who doesn't like mess, or you have a white kitchen. That's why you send your children to school. Teachers have linoleum floors and endless pots of paint and aprons. And if you aren't good with messy play, you're not going to have a pleasurable experience, and nor is your child. In fact, you're going to create anxiety. Just to clarify, play is not something that needs to be organized or structured. The best kind of play, in fact, is spontaneous play. And very often, the moment isn't right. And I don't think it's a bad thing if children say they're bored. I think it's okay to be bored, because it's out of the feeling of being bored, in fact, that children are more likely to invent or create or find something that they can use to amuse themselves or use to make. There's so much pressure on mothers today to be more than what they're required to be, which is good enough. There's a kind of a pressure to be what I call a Pinterest or an Instagram mum, cooking impressive meals, creating fantastical play activities, decorating beautifully styled playrooms. And I think a lot of that is done to impress other people or to try and address insecurities and anxieties about how just to be with your child. But I don't think that children are going to grow up and say that they had a fun or happy childhood because they ate complicated meals, or because their playroom was absolutely beautiful, or because you rainbow-coloured rice and allowed them to glue it on glass in the garden. Children just want to know that they are a source of fun and that they make you happy, and that's what they're looking for in childhood. So ordinary stuff is actually better than extraordinary stuff. Good enough is really that. It's good and it's enough. So the challenge is to find something that you both enjoy doing. It may be kicking, it may be icing biscuits, it may be watching TV together, which is always a source of anxiety for parents because they don't know how much they should or shouldn't be watching. But I think if you are going to allow your children to watch TV, do it with him or her. First of all, you get to mediate what it is that they're watching. And secondly, it means that it's something that is a shared activity. It's not that you're using the TV as a babysitter. But if there's one activity that I do think can be promoted, and really from much earlier than you'd think you could be trying it with your child, and that's reading. Reading allows children to feel physically safe, close, comfortable, because reading usually happens either on a bed or in a chair, in close contact, arms around each other. Reading is shown to have a hugely positive impact on cognitive development and on the development of literacy skills. It's also a wonderful opportunity to mediate the world for your children, to talk about the things that you're reading to your children. And children's authors write books about some of the hardest topics we may need to talk to our children about. And of course, good children's literature encourages imagination and creativity. So, how do you play with your small child? When parents ask me this question, I ask them to think about how they were played with by the adults in their world when they were little. Play is an important part of life, alongside work and alongside love. And you may also want to think about what role play has in your own life today. You need to know something about yourself if you're going to be able to play with your child, and you also need to know something about your child if it's going to be something that is mutually enjoyable and pleasurable. So I can tell you about a mum that I watched playing Lego on her child's request in a playroom, and while the little boy struggled to find the wheels and the blocks that he needed to make his vehicle, Mum got quite into building the most elaborate vehicle. Very impressive. What she didn't notice was that her child was becoming increasingly disheartened and disillusioned by his own efforts in comparison to hers, and eventually realizing that in fact she wasn't playing with him, she was having her own playtime, and he eventually turned away from it. So if you are going to play with your child, it's important that you follow their cue. And if you don't know how to do that, one good way is just to do exactly what they're doing. If they're building a tower, copy the tower that they're building. Do it the same way that they are. If they want to knock it down, knock yours down too. I've said before that I think the play is very important for children because it is a way that they communicate and it's a way that they process what they're experiencing at an emotional level. And it's important, again, to watch the cue that your child is giving you through play rather than reading it through the lens that you'd prefer to be reading it through. For example, I can remember watching a friend's child playing, and as part of the play, he came up to his mum with a crocodile puppet and gave her a couple of gnaws on the cheek. "Oh, the puppet's kissing me," she said, which it wasn't at all what I think the child was trying to tell her. I think he was trying to tell her something about some more angry or aggressive feelings. And I mean, we often misread what our children try to communicate to us, and unfortunately in that moment, that mom did. Fortunately, too, she was able to, as we always are, pick it up and correct it at a later stage. Children will find more than one opportunity to try and tell us what they're telling us. So if you don't get it the first time, the chances are you'll get it the second or the third. You need to play with genuine, authentic communications of passion, enjoyment, excitement, and pleasure. Children know when you're faking it, and this causes them some distress because they then have to figure out why what you're saying or what you're trying to show on your face or in your body language doesn't match with some other kind of communication they're getting from you. And that makes them question whether they really do have the capacity to be a source of delight to you, and ultimately undermines their sense of good self-esteem. So if you're tired, or if it's a game you don't enjoy, rather don't use that opportunity to play with your child. Try and help them to find something that they can do on their own or with a sibling. Wait until you feel that the mood for you is right. And even if it's not that you spend the whole afternoon playing, it's not about the quantity of time you spend with your child. It really is about the quality of your child. And if you're not sure how exactly to play, follow your child's lead. Listen to what he or she is telling you. They know what they want to do with you. Children will have different opportunities to play in terms of both the environments, at home, at school, on a playground, at a playmate. And they also get to interact with different kinds of adults when they're playing. How granny plays with children may be very different to how your child's teacher plays with her. But so too, mums and dads often play differently with their children. Dads are so important in a child's development because they represent the link from home to the outside world. In most families, a mum who's on maternity leave will be at home and dad will come home at the end of the day. So children are curious about their dads, and the kinds of exciting smells and fantasies that they bring with them. And dads seem to open up play too. It's often rougher, it's often a bit wilder. Dads don't use the same kind of tone of voice, they often don't use the same sort of language. So it helps children, it toughens them up, it helps with resilience and robustness, and it certainly is important that children are stimulated by the kinds of play opportunities that they get with dads or people who play like dads. Playing with your children is important, and particularly if you can find ways of doing it that is delightful for both of you, because it's going to make parenting, it's one of the fun things about parenting, is being able to play with your child. And for your child, it's a very important foundation for his developing positive self-esteem.